There are places where the veil between the known and the unknown wears thin. Not always in ancient, crumbling manor houses or forgotten graveyards, but sometimes, chillingly, in the very heart of our sanctuaries, our homes. Tonight, we journey into the heart of domestic terror, where the safety we crave becomes a fragile illusion. Prepare yourselves, for the fear that stalks these tales isn't born of specters, but of the very human darkness that lurks just beyond the threshold, and sometimes even within. Listen closely, for these are not mere stories. They are warnings whispered from the shadows, tales of ordinary nights twisted into extraordinary nightmares. The echoing shed. The old house, nestled on 3 sprawling acres, no longer belongs to his parents. It was sold 5 years ago, but the memories, much like lingering shadows, persist. It was a substantial property, with a main house that felt a bit too big for just him, and a storage building out back, a metal behemoth that housed all the machinery of country living. He was only 13 when it happened, an age where his parents often left him alone, trusting him with the vast solitude of the property due to his uncommon maturity. It was a weekend, a typical Saturday afternoon, and the flickering glow of his PS2 illuminated the living room as he navigated the sun-drenched streets of Vice City. The comfortable hum of the game was suddenly shattered by a jarring sound, a sharp, echoing clank of hollow steel, like a dumpster lid slamming down, or the heavy groan of rusted hinges snapping open from somewhere outside in the yard. It was the sound of something large and metal being moved forcefully, something that rattled the very air. He was on his feet instantly, dashing to every window, his eyes scanning the familiar landscape for any disturbance. Nothing. Until he reached the window overlooking the storage building. Its heavy door, the one that usually required a solid yank to open, was now completely, unnervingly ajar. A cold knot tightened in his stomach. He moved on instinct, grabbing his dad's old bolt-action .22 hunting rifle from the closet. It was loaded, but he'd only ever fired it at tin cans in the back 40. His hands were shaking, and he wasn't even sure if the safety was still on. Stepping outside, the rifle felt both heavy and utterly useless. He made his presence known, his voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in his hands, shouting, "Who's in there?" But only silence answered, thick and heavy like the summer air. As he approached the building, he made sure to declare, "I have a gun," before even peering inside. The interior was a jumble of farm equipment, a sit-down mower, a quad, countless lawn care items. Enough places for someone to hide, to simply wait. Even as a kid, he wasn't easily scared, but this was different. He felt truly unsettled. With a desperate resolve, he slammed the heavy door shut, a futile attempt to cage whatever unseen presence might still lurk within, and hurried back inside the house. He locked the door, the click of the deadbolt a small, hollow comfort, then settled by the window, his gaze fixed on that storage building for what felt like an eternity, half expecting the door to swing open again at any second. He knew that door was impossible to open by itself. Someone undeniably had opened it. The terrifying question remained, were they still inside? He needed his dad. Moving to the kitchen, he picked up the landline phone and dialed his father's cell. No answer. He left a voicemail, a relic of a time before texting became mainstream. Returning to his vigil by the window, he put on a TV show, its background noise a flimsy shield against the encroaching silence. The phone remained clutched in his hand. Just as he was about to give up his lonely watch, a faint creak echoed from upstairs. His heart leaped into his throat, a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. The big question clawed at his mind. Was he just working himself up? Or was someone truly here? He possessed a serious guard dog mentality. Whether he loved the place or not, it was his family's, and he felt an overwhelming need to protect it. But he was in over his head. Gripping the rifle once more, he started his ascent upstairs. This time, he remained silent. Calling out would only alert a potential intruder that he knew they were there. At the top of the stairs, he flicked on the hallway light. 5 doors stood closed, 4 leading to bedrooms, 1 to the bathroom. Each had a decent crack underneath, a sliver of darkness that offered a disturbing view. The creak had come from the side of the house where his parents' bedroom was. He sank to his knees, peering under the crack of their door, and there they were, 2 bare feet, facing the other side of the door. They were adult-sized, pale and dirty, with thick toes and cracked heels. The toenails looked discolored, like they hadn't seen soap in weeks. The skin around the ankles was bruised or smeared with something he didn't want to guess. His stomach twisted into a sickening knot. The reality of the situation crashed down on him with brutal force. Rifle shaking in his hands, he knew the gun wasn't a shield, it was a question. Could he point it at another human being? Could he pull the trigger? His answer was no. He wasn't ready to hurt someone, and if he realized that, he was done for. He wasn't ready to threaten or, God forbid, shoot someone. Scrambling to his feet, he bolted downstairs, seeking refuge in the bathroom, where he desperately tried to call his dad again. Still no answer. He left another voicemail, then called again and again, but his dad never picked up. His phone likely set down somewhere. Finally, he did what he should have done from the start. He dialed 911. Whispering into the phone, he detailed every terrifying event as it unfolded. The operator instructed him to stay silent, to sit tight in the bathroom. Then, he heard them. Footsteps descending the stairs, slow and deliberate. They approached the bathroom door, as if whoever it was somehow knew exactly where he had gone. The footsteps stopped. A brief, agonizing pause. Then, a deep and scratchy voice, with the slight slur of someone who hadn't slept in days or maybe someone drunk. But it was calm, too calm, like this wasn't the first time he'd crept into a stranger's house. The way he said, "What's up, kid?" wasn't playful. It was cold, as if he was already cornered. The words, the voice, they were seared into his memory. Even today, he'd recognize it instantly. He almost cried. That's how truly terrified he was. Defying the operator's instructions, he spoke. Loud and clear, his voice trembling but firm. "I'm on the phone with the cops right now, and I have a gun." He put the operator on speaker as she frantically asked if everything was okay. The man outside attempted to open the door, and finding it locked, he heard him walk away. The footsteps faded to silence, followed by the distinct sound of a door slamming. It was the back door. The slam of the back door echoed down the hall, and he realized he hadn't broken in. He'd just walked in when he left it unlocked, and now he'd left the same way, like it was nothing. He breathed a shaky sigh of relief, waiting in agonizing anticipation for the police to arrive. When they finally did, 1,000,000 pounds lifted from his shoulders. After a thorough inspection of the house, inside and out, confirming the man was truly gone, they asked if there was anywhere else he could stay. He suggested his uncle's house. They contacted his uncle, who spoke with the police, and then took him away from that terrifying place. The thing that haunts him most to this day is the crushing weight of responsibility. It was his fault. He could have prevented it. He had left the back door unlocked when he went to investigate the storage building. That's when the man had simply walked right into the house. Even with a rifle in his hands, he hadn't felt safe at all. It was truly the most horrific experience of his life. Life has a way of teaching us harsh lessons, often when we least expect them. Sometimes, the greatest dangers aren't the monsters lurking in the dark, but the quiet moments of oversight, the seemingly harmless habits that can leave us vulnerable. Always remember, the strongest lock is often the one you remember to turn. The Stalker's Whisper. 18 years old, and Kate had the fort to hold. Her parents were away on a week-long anniversary trip, leaving her to the isolated expanse of their property, enclosed by thick woods, with only a long, winding dirt driveway leading to the quiet back road. Houses were separated by decent distances, fostering a palpable sense of solitude. In this town, everyone knew everyone. Familiar faces were a constant at the gas station, the grocery store, and later, the local bars. This story began, fittingly, at a gas station, midway through her parents' absence. She was filling her tank when a black Jeep Cherokee pulled up to the pump beside hers. A man with a goatee stepped out, offering a casual greeting, a common courtesy in their small town. He locked his nozzle into the tank, then walked around to her side of the pump. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you know how to get to the interstate from here?" She helped him, giving him directions as best she could. He pulled out a notepad, a strange anachronism in an age of cell phones, and began meticulously writing down her instructions. He wrote slowly, like he wasn't in a rush. She couldn't help but notice he only glanced at her while she spoke more than the notepad. He thanked her, then asked if she was from the area. "Yeah, I grew up here," she replied. He said he was from out of town but didn't specify where. He returned to his side, replacing the nozzle, then asked her name, claiming it was nice to meet her. "Kate," she said. "What a lovely name," he replied, a little too fixed of a smile on his face, a little too deliberate, before they both got into their cars. She drove out first, turning left onto the road back home. It was only a few minutes before she approached their turn into the driveway. She slowed, flicked on her blinker, and turned right onto the property. It was then she saw it in her rearview mirror, the black Jeep Cherokee. He passed her as she turned, heading the complete opposite way she'd told him to go for the interstate. He didn't slow down, but she swore she saw his head turn just a bit as he passed, like he was confirming the house. It seemed, perhaps, he'd just forgotten the directions. She dismissed it, let herself inside, and went about her day. That night, as she walked to her car to meet friends, she heard footsteps nearby. The house was enclosed by woods, and it was the middle of summer, so it could have been any number of animals. She didn't investigate, simply got in her car and left. But hours later, returning home, as she walked from her car to the front door, a man's voice, from out somewhere in the deep shadows of the woods, called out, "Kate!" She got the chills, looking around frantically, then rushed to yank open the front door. She slammed it shut, leaning against it, trying to catch her breath on the couch. The neighbors all knew her name, but their houses were distant, and there was no reason for one of them to call her name like that, like a creep, without identifying themselves. She called her parents, who, dismissive of her fear, suggested it must have been a neighbor and they'd probably just knock on the door. She didn't mention the gas station encounter. The next day, a Saturday, she stayed home. Later that night, preparing to meet friends again, she stepped outside. As she walked to her car, she heard it again, loud and clear from the not-so-far distance. "Kate!" There was an edge to it, like he knew she heard him the first time, and was testing how far he could push. This time, she didn't hesitate. She ran back inside, locking the door. She called 911, texting her family as she did so. 2 officers arrived, sweeping the perimeter with their flashlights, then simply told her to call again if it persisted. She didn't feel much better. They just swept the yard with flashlights and left. She needed reassurance. Instead, she felt like she'd just wasted their time. She didn't dare go outside again until the next day for work. She served at a nearby restaurant, working a late shift. She left the house in broad daylight, a chilling paranoia clinging to her, dreading that voice. Thankfully, she didn't hear it. Perhaps the police car had finally scared him off. After hours of work, all she wanted was her bed. Pulling onto her property, she parked out front and walked to the door. She stopped. Footsteps again, but these weren't an animal's. She stood on the front deck for a second, waiting. Then, that familiar voice yelled out, "Kate, don't call the cops on me again, cutie!" The words were mocking, personal, twisted. This crossed into taunting and power play territory. "You need help! You're sick!" she screamed back, rushing inside. She called the police once more. They came again, searched again, and left again. Her parents told her to stay at a friend's house. She couldn't agree more. They'd be back the following night, and then she would finally feel safe. Her friend Alex offered her place. Packing a bag, Kate checked the windows, ensuring the coast was clear. She hurried outside, locked the door as fast as she could, and ran to her car. As she turned the key in the ignition, something slammed against the window at his elbow. It wasn't a tap. It was a full hit, like he was trying to break through. Right outside the driver's side door, a man in a black ski mask, tall and broad-shouldered, stood trying to open it. His eyes locked on hers, and she couldn't even scream. She felt like she was choking on air. As she threw the car into drive, He started hitting the glass with his elbow, a sharp thudding crack that vibrated through the car door. She looped her car around on the grass, sped down the driveway, and turned right up the road, not stopping until she reached Alex's house. Hysterically crying, she clung to Alex and her dad on the phone the whole drive. Alex's dad said he would have come to pick her up had he known. Together, they called the police for a third time. Officers went to her parents' house to investigate, ensuring no windows were shattered. Another officer came to Alex's house, where Kate once again recounted her terrifying ordeal. It was probably the most action those Quiet Town cops had seen in a long time. Thankfully, her parents returned home the next day, and Kate finally felt safe again. Kate believes, unequivocally, that the man at the gas station had followed her home intentionally, scoping out the property, realizing she was alone, and for whatever reason, toyed with her until he finally tried to pounce. She should never have given her real name. She should have been more alert, more aware of his pursuit that day. Some people, she muses, are just nuts and have far too much time on their hands. This incident became a massive motivating factor in her decision to move into her own apartment just a few months later. We often believe our homes are impenetrable fortresses, but sometimes the greatest threats are the ones who slip through the cracks of our assumptions, turning innocent encounters into terrifying obsessions. Always trust your gut instinct, especially when something feels just a little too normal. The Unblinking Smile. He was 15 or 16, consumed by the pixelated worlds of StarCraft, an obsession that often kept him glued to his PC through weekend nights. This was just before the world locked down with COVID, and on this particular night, his entire family was gone, leaving him utterly alone. The familiar hum of his computer in his first-floor bedroom was suddenly interrupted by the doorbell, ringing twice, sharp and insistent. He hurried to the door, eager not to be away from his game too long, fearing a loss. Reaching the front door, he asked, as he always would when alone, "Who is it?" A soft, papery whisper, like breath over sandpaper, answered from the other side, a voice so weak he couldn't quite make out the words. It sounded like a woman. He opened the main door, leaving the storm door as a barrier, revealing an older woman standing on the other side, her face stretched into a wide smile. She wore a sagging pink cardigan and had frizzy gray hair tucked sloppily behind her ears. Her cheeks looked sunken, but her smile was too wide like a mask she couldn't take off. Her hands were clasped behind her back. Through the screen, he asked, "Can I help you?" She replied that she needed to use a phone and, with unsettling directness, asked if she could come inside. Since childhood, he'd been taught never to let strangers into the house, no matter who they were. Yet, he felt an awkwardness, unsure how to turn her away. He redirected her to the library a few blocks down, knowing deep down it would be closed, a desperate attempt to make this stranger leave. Her smile remained fixed, but her next words didn't match it. Her voice was sharper now, scolding like a teacher trying to make a point without raising her voice. That's very rude to turn away an old lady asking for help. He could only offer the excuse of house rules. His parents didn't allow strangers inside. As he slowly began closing the door, mumbling apologies, she stood motionless, still smiling. The smile never moved, but her eyes went flat like flipping off a light behind them. It was the kind of expression that made you feel watched, not welcomed. He walked back to his room, but the doorbell rang again. There was no way in hell he was opening it. That woman radiated weird vibes from the start. Maybe something was wrong with her. Maybe she wasn't all there. These were things he couldn't know, and perhaps it was selfish to send her away, but he wouldn't open the door for anyone when home alone. He returned to his game. Not long after he sat down, he heard something tapping on his window. It was a slow, deliberate click every couple seconds, like she was thinking between taps. And it wasn't her knuckle. It sounded sharp, metal. The window was directly in front of his desk, but the blind was pulled down, obscuring his view. He already had a terrifying idea of who it was. His room was the only one with a light on in the house. The horrific thought that it was the old woman from earlier, and that she had simply walked to his window terrified him. He muted his computer. The game no longer mattered. The persistent clinking sound on the window finally made him snap. "Okay, this," he muttered, abandoning his room for another part of the house. He sat in the oppressive darkness of the living room for a bit when the doorbell rang again. This woman was harassing him now. He tried to convince himself she was just a confused old woman, clueless as to her whereabouts. But when the doorbell rang a second and third time, a new resolve hardened within him. He decided to open the door, this time to offer to call someone for her. But when he opened it, there was a man on the other side. He looked about 10 years younger than the woman, with greasy hair tucked into a hood, and he kept his hands in his pockets. He didn't look panicked, more like he was performing concern. "Have you seen my mother?" he asked through the storm door. The boy replied that she had just been at his door. The man apologized, explaining she had dementia and had gotten out of the house. The boy felt a pang of guilt. But then the man asked if he could come in for a minute. Again, that awkward feeling. Why did he need to come inside? He gave the same excuse as before they could talk through the door. He then suggested she might have gone into the backyard, as he'd heard something at his window telling the man he could go around back and check. The man thanked him and walked down the walkway. The boy thought he had gone to the backyard, but when he looked out the back window, expecting to see him searching, there was no one. Neither the man nor his mother. This was all too weird. He went to bed early that night, drifting off with the TV on in the background, until he heard it again. The clinking sound on the window, something metal tapping on the glass. Remembering the seemingly concerned man, he decided to try and help. He approached the window, slowly lifted the blind with his hand, and there she was, the woman, outside his window, with that same unnerving smile. She held it with just her fingertips, tapping the blade's edge of a kitchen knife against the glass like she was trying to lure him in with Morse code. He dropped the blind and crawled back into bed. This didn't feel real. A suspiciously short time later, the doorbell rang 4 times. The clinking had stopped. This was all too suspicious. It felt like some kind of robbery attempt. He ignored the doorbell, remaining in bed, waiting it out. He didn't have a cell phone at the time, not being the most social guy, and for some reason, he just didn't want to call the police. He didn't call the cops because part of him still didn't believe it was real, and another part was afraid they'd say he overreacted. He felt stupid for being scared, even though he knew deep down this wasn't normal. He waited until it finally stopped. The next morning, he called his dad and recounted everything. His dad commended him for not opening the door. Everyone agreed it sounded like an attempted robbery. Was there a chance the woman truly had dementia, and the man was her concerned son? Perhaps, but it all seemed far too coordinated. Why did he want to come inside too? How did he know she came to his house specifically? Why didn't he go into the backyard to look for her when given permission? Too many unanswered questions, leading him to believe he avoided something truly terrible by keeping that door shut. As for the storyteller's own recent experience, it inspired him to revisit this theme. Just a week ago, his friend Cody asked him to watch his dog, Theo, a little Pomsky with a penchant for barking. So when Theo started barking like crazy at something outside, he initially ignored it, but then Theo went to the back door and wouldn't stop, leading him to believe the dog needed to go out. As he approached the door, he realized someone was trying to open it from the outside. Through the screen, he saw another man looking right back at him. This was his backyard, already alarming. The man was not someone he recognized as Cody's family. "Who are you?" he asked. The man responded, "Have you seen Melissa?" Melissa was Cody's younger sister in her 20s. This guy, however, looked to be in his mid-50s and homeless. His hands were filthy and twitching. He kept swaying like he couldn't keep his balance, but his eyes were dead set on the door like Melissa owed him something. He told the man to leave, that no Melissa lived there. "You sure?" the man asked. "Yes, you need to leave. There are cameras all over the property," he asserted. The man left immediately. Getting him to leave was easy, but when Cody asked his sister, she had no idea who the man could be. He looked about 55, drunk and filthy, not someone Cody's 20-something sister would associate with. The fact that he went to the back door and tried to let himself in was terrifying. One could only imagine what he was trying to do to Melissa. He couldn't stop thinking, what if he hadn't seen him? What if Melissa had come home alone and walked through that back door? What was he planning? A robbery? Something worse. That thought kept him up the rest of the night. That's why so many of these stories could be avoided by just keeping your doors locked. We often find comfort in the familiar faces and quiet rhythms of our communities. Yet sometimes, the greatest dangers wear the disguise of lost souls or casual encounters. Always remain vigilant, for the most innocent interactions can sometimes be the first step in a predator's chilling game. Your awareness sometimes is the only barrier between you and the shadow that seeks to enter.